Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. The red dwarf son of Calyx 9 hung low, its crimson light carving deep shadows across the shattered plains of the Vorin Badlands. Captain Ethan Cole pressed himself against a slab of volcanic glass, his pulse carbine warm in his hands, the air thick with ash and static. His recon mission had gone sideways when a plasma flare knocked out his comms, leaving him stranded in a wasteland that seemed to pulse with malice. Sweat stung his eyes, and every breath tasted like iron. He was alone, a human speck in a world that didn't want him. The silence broke with a screech of metal on stone. Figures emerged from the haze, tall, sinuous forms moving with a predator's grace. The Sytherans, a species of sleek, luminescent warriors, glided across the jagged terrain. Their skin shimmered like liquid starlight, etched with glowing runes that pulsed with faint energy. Before Ethan could react, a neural whip lashed out, coiling around his wrists, and yanking him to his knees. His carbine hit the ground useless. "Stay down, fleshkin!" The voice was sharp, melodic, filtered through a translator implant in his ear. The speaker loomed over him, a Sytheran warrior nearly 2 meters tall, her lithe frame radiating power. Her eyes glowed like twin amethysts, piercing and unyielding. Intricate runes traced her jawline, glowing faintly in the dim light. In her hand she held a staff tipped with a crescent blade, its edge humming with a faint violet energy. Ethan's gaze caught a thin fracture running through the staff's grip, a flaw that seemed to shimmer in sync with her movements. Another Sytheran, broader and scarred, stepped forward, her runes duller, her posture aggressive. "Why bother, Lyrath? End it now. Humans are a blight." Her voice was a low growl, her eyes narrowing with disgust. Lyrath's grip tightened on her staff, the blade tilting slightly. Ethan noted the crack again, a scar she carried like a badge. "The Conclave decides, Mirvier," Lyrath said, her tone cold as the void. "Not you," Mirvier hissed, her claws flexing, but she backed off, her gaze burning into Ethan. He stayed silent, his mind racing. He catalogued details: the Sytheran's advanced tech, energy weapons paired with ritualistic bone charms, their armor a blend of sleek composites and ceremonial etchings. Lyrath was the enigma. Her stance was predatory, but her eyes held a flicker of curiosity, like she was dissecting him with every glance. The march to the Sytheran citadel was a grueling slog through a landscape of razor-sharp obsidian and choking ash. The Badlands seemed to shift underfoot, as if alive and resentful. The Sytherans moved with an eerie fluidity, their clawed feet barely touching the ground, while Ethan stumbled, his bound wrists aching. He kept his eyes sharp, mapping the terrain, the way the Sytherans navigated by instinct, their runes glowing brighter in shadowed ravines. His legs burned, his boots scuffed raw, but he refused to show weakness. Not to them. The citadel rose from the plains like a cathedral of glass and bone, its spires catching the red light in a kaleidoscope of crimson and violet. Bioluminescent filaments wove through the walls, casting a soft glow that made the Sytherans seem ethereal. Inside, the structure was a labyrinth of spiraling corridors, their walls pulsing with faint light. Sytheran young, smaller, their runes faint, darted out of sight, their glowing eyes wide with fear or fascination. Ethan caught their glances, fleeting but heavy, before they were ushered away by elders. The conclave chamber was a vast, circular arena, its ceiling a dome of translucent crystal that refracted the dwarf sun's light into shimmering patterns. At its center stood a pulsating orb, its surface alive with swirling energy, humming like a heartbeat. 12 Sytheran elders sat on raised platforms, their runes faded but their presence commanding, their eyes glinting like polished gems. The air was thick with tension, a storm waiting to break. "Lyrath of the Star Vale," the eldest elder intoned, her voice a lone melody that carried despite its age. "Explain this trespasser." Lyrath stepped forward, her staff held in a formal grip, the crack catching the orb's light. "Honored Prime, I captured this fleshkin in the Forbidden Badlands, armed and deliberate. It moved with intent. I bring it for judgment. A human," another elder spat, the word dripping with venom. "A scout for their spreading rot. Lyrath tilted her head, her amethyst eyes fixed on Ethan. Perhaps. But it did not flee when trapped, nor plead when bound. It watched. It learned. The Prime leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. You understand our words, Fleshkin? Ethan met her gaze, his pulse steady despite the weight of their stares. I do. And you're making the mistake every species makes about humans. The chamber fell silent, the air heavy with unspoken threats. Lyrath's claws twitched, her staff shifting slightly. What mistake? The Prime asked, her tone sharp as a blade. Ethan's lips curved, a spark of defiance in his eyes. Thinking we're prey because we're different. The words landed like a gauntlet thrown. Lyrath moved like a flash, the butt of her staff cracking across Ethan's jaw. Pain exploded, blood trickling from his split lip. The chamber echoed with the blow. That's for being human, Lyrath hissed, the crack in her staff seeming to pulse with her anger. Ethan staggered but didn't fall, his bound hands useless. He spat blood onto the glowing floor, then raised his head, a feral grin spreading across his face. Then you'll love my next move. He turned, ignoring the crescent blade inches from his back, and faced the Conclave with a boldness that sent a ripple through the elders. You call us a blight, but you're fighting a war you don't understand. I'm Captain Ethan Cole, Terran Vanguard. My mission was to see if peace is possible. But if you want to fight, humans don't lose easy. His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of someone who'd walked through fire and come out grinning. The chamber erupted in a chorus of hisses and murmurs, elders arguing in sharp, melodic tones. Lyrath stood silent, her eyes locked on Ethan, unreadable but intense, like she was seeing something new. The Prime raised a claw, silencing the noise. This fleshkin will be held pending our verdict. Lyrath, you brought it. It is your burden. Lyrath's runes flared briefly, a flicker of frustration breaking her calm. She led Ethan to a cell carved from translucent crystal, its walls glowing with faint pulses of light. It was less a prison than a sparse chamber, with a sleeping ledge and a basin of shimmering liquid. Twice daily, Lyrath delivered rations, a protein paste that tasted like ash and a tangy, metallic fruit that burned his throat. She said little, her staff always between him and the door, its cracked grip a constant reminder of her strength and her flaws. Days blurred into a haze of tension and waiting. Ethan spent his time studying the cell, testing its walls, memorizing every detail of Lyrath's visits. She was a paradox, cold, precise, yet her eyes held a spark of doubt, maybe curiosity. He clung to that, filing it away like a tool he might need. On the fifth day, chaos shattered the routine. Alarms sang through the citadel, a haunting melody that set Ethan's nerves on edge. Lyrath burst into the cell, her composure frayed, her runes glowing brighter. Raiders from the Ember Wastes, she said, her voice tight. They've breached the outer spires and are heading for the Starheart. Her eyes locked onto Ethan. You're coming with me. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his wrists still bound, his jaw still aching from her strike. Why would I help you? Lyrath's staff tilted, her voice sharp. Because if they destroy the Starheart, this entire Badland collapses, including your extraction point 30 clicks east. You die with us. Ethan studied her, searching for a lie but finding only urgency. His mind raced, refuse, and he'd rot in this cell, help, and he might prove something. What do you need? He asked, his tone steady. Lyrath's eyes narrowed, reassessing him. Your kind are cunning. Show me. They moved to the armory, a vault lined with weapons, plasma lances gleaming with cold precision, bone daggers etched with glowing runes. Lyrath handed him a pulse carbine and a tactical harness, its weight grounding him. This will kill you as easily as them, she warned. Remember that. They slipped through emergency tunnels to a jagged outcrop overlooking the Ember Wastes, a scorched expanse where heat shimmered like a mirage. Below, raiders, Sytheran deserters in patchwork armor, moved with lethal precision, their runes dim but deadly. 12 of them, Lyrath whispered, her scope tracking their movements. Veterans. Armed to the teeth. Ethan squinted through the ash, his training kicking in. And your defenders? Lyrath's silence was answer enough. He grinned, grim but determined. Just us? Your conclave's out of their minds. They pulled everyone to guard the inner Starheart, Lyrath said, her voice edged with frustration. A mistake. Ethan's mind churned, piecing together the raiders' strategy. They're drawing your forces into a choke point, while a smaller team hits the real target. Is there another way to the Starheart? Lyrath's runes flared, her eyes flicking to him with a mix of suspicion and respect. The void tunnel's ancient, unstable. No one's used them in generations. Ethan's grin widened, his blood pumping. Someone's using them now. Let's move. The void tunnels were a nightmare of crumbling crystal and suffocating darkness, the air thick with static. Lyrath's staff cast a violet glow, illuminating passages that twisted like a fever dream. The walls hummed faintly, and the ground shifted underfoot, threatening to collapse. Ethan's boots crunched on loose shards, his human frame struggling to match Lyrath's fluid grace. Every step was a gamble, every sound a potential betrayal. A faint glow flickered ahead, barely visible through a crack in the tunnel wall. Ethan peered through, his breath catching. The Starheart loomed, a massive orb pulsing with energy, its light swirling like a trapped galaxy. 4 raiders in stealth armor crept toward it, their plasma charges primed. If they destabilize the core, the citadel falls, Lyrath whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's mind raced, his training screaming for action. I've got a plan, he said, his voice low. You won't like it. Lyrath's eyes narrowed. Speak. I draw their fire. You take them out. Her staff tilted, her runes flaring. That's suicide. Ethan's grin was reckless, his heart pounding. Or exactly what they won't expect. Before she could argue, he slipped through the crack, his carbine loose, his movements deliberately clumsy. He stumbled into the chamber, boots scuffing loudly. The raiders spun, their weapons snapping up, their eyes glinting with contempt. A human? Their leader snarled, her voice dripping with disgust. How did this filth get here? Ethan raised his hands, his carbine dangling, his voice trembling with feigned fear. I surrender! I'm just a prisoner. Got lost. The raiders laughed, their guard dropping. It was the opening he needed. Lyra struck like a comet, her crescent blades slicing through the first raider's armor. Ethan dove for cover, his carbine roaring. His first shot dropped a second raider, his second grazed the leader. The third raider turned her charge toward the Starheart, her claw on the trigger. Stop! Lyra shouted, too far to act. Ethan launched himself forward, tackling the raider. The charge detonated against the wall, scorching crystal. They grappled, her claws tearing into his shoulder, but Ethan was faster. He disarmed her, pinning her down, his knee pressed into her chest until she stopped struggling. Lyrath loomed over him, her blade raised, its hum filling the air. For a moment he thought she'd strike. Then she lowered her staff, offering a claw. You fought well, Fleshkin, she said, her voice softer, almost grudging. Ethan took it, panting, blood dripping from his shoulder. Thanks. I think. The citadel was in chaos when they emerged, alarms still singing, the air heavy with scorched crystal. Lyrath led Ethan to the conclave, where elders argued in sharp, melodic tones. Their return, Ethan still armed, silenced the chamber. Honored Prime, Lyrath said, her voice steady. The Starheart is safe. The raiders are dead. The human fought beside me. The Prime's eyes narrowed. A human aiding us? Unheard of. Ethan stepped forward, his jaw tight, his shoulder burning. The situation called for it. Your enemies don't play by your rules. Neither should you if you want to survive. The elders hissed, but the Prime raised a claw. You vouch for this Fleshkin, Lyrath? I do, she said, her staff firm, the crack catching the light. Then it is your responsibility. Provisional ally status, pending review. That night, Lyrath led Ethan to her quarters, a stark chamber overlooking the Badlands, its walls lined with weapons etched with battle scars. A balcony opened to the night, where the red dwarf sun sank, painting the plains in shades of blood and shadow. "You're not a prisoner," Lyreth said, "but not free. Prove your worth, or the Conclave will end you." Ethan nodded, stepping onto the balcony. The air was sharp, the ash less choking here. He leaned against the railing, his eyes tracing the jagged horizon. "Why didn't you kill me in the tunnels?" he asked, his voice quiet but direct. Lyreth's runes glowed faintly, her eyes glinting. "You didn't run. You could have, but you fought. I want to know why." Ethan's lips curved, his defiance softened by exhaustion. "Maybe I'm just too damn stubborn to die." Lyreth's eyes flickered, a spark of something, respect, maybe, or curiosity. "Perhaps that's the point." The Voran Badlands stretched endlessly under the crimson glow of Calyx 9's dwarf sun, its light fractured by swirling ash clouds. Ethan Cole stood on the balcony of Lyreth's quarters, the air sharp with the tang of iron and ozone. His shoulder throbbed where the raider's claws had torn into him, the wound bandaged but raw. The citadel hummed faintly behind him, its bioluminescent walls pulsing like a living thing. He wasn't a prisoner anymore, not exactly, but the weight of the Sytheran's provisional trust pressed heavier than any chains. Lyreth stood beside him, her crescent blade staff resting against the railing, its cracked grip catching the fading light. Her amethyst eyes scanned the horizon, unreadable but restless. "You're still here," she said, her voice a low melody, tinged with something Ethan couldn't place, doubt, maybe, or curiosity. "Why?" Ethan's lips twitched, his usual grin tempered by exhaustion. "Told you. Too stubborn to die." He leaned against the railing, ignoring the ache in his shoulder. "Besides, I'm not big on leaving things half-finished. Your Conclave might not trust me, but I'm betting you do. At least a little." Lyreth's runes flared briefly, a flicker of violet light across her shimmering skin. "Trust is earned, Fleshkin. You've started, but it's a long path." She turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "Your kind are unpredictable. That makes you dangerous." "Dangerous is my specialty," Ethan said, his grin widening. "Question is, dangerous to who?" Before Lyreth could respond, a sharp chime cut through the air, an alarm, its melody harsher than the one that had signaled the raider's attack. Her posture stiffened, her staff snapping into her hands. "Trouble," she said, already moving. "Come." They navigated the citadel's spiraling corridors, the walls pulsing faster, as if sensing the growing tension. Sytherans rushed past, their runes glowing with urgency, their claws clicking against the crystal floor. Ethan kept pace, his pulse carbine slung across his back, its weight a reminder of the fragile alliance he'd earned. The conclave chamber was a storm of voices when they arrived, elders arguing in sharp, overlapping tones. At the center, the Starheart orb pulsed erratically, its swirling energy casting jagged shadows. The Prime raised a claw, silencing the chaos. "Lyreth of the Star Vale, report." Her eyes flicked to Ethan, lingering with suspicion. "And explain why the Fleshkin is still armed." Lyreth stepped forward, her staff formal but firm. "Honored Prime, the human fought beside me to protect the Starheart. His tactics saved us. I vouch for his presence." Murmurs rippled through the elders, some hostile, others curious. Ethan stood tall, his jaw tight, the ache in his shoulder a dull roar. He wasn't here to beg. "Speak, Fleshkin," the Prime said, her voice cold. "What do you know of this new threat?" Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "Your alarms aren't ringing for nothing. Those raiders weren't a one-off. They're organized, and they're coming for the Starheart again. You're not fighting a skirmish, you're in a war." The chamber erupted in hisses, elders leaning forward, their runes flaring. "Insolence!" one spat, her claws twitching. "A human dares lecture us on war?" Another elder, younger, her runes brighter, leaned forward. "Yet he saved the Starheart. Let him speak." Ethan didn't flinch. "Your raiders are deserters, right? Exiles from your clans. They're not just scavengers, they're unified, moving with purpose. Someone's leading them, and they're playing you. Drawing your forces to the Starheart while they hit your outposts, cut your supply lines, and weaken your defenses. Classic divide and conquer. The Prime's eyes narrowed, her claws tapping the throne. And what would you propose, Fleshkin? Don't play their game, Ethan said. You're hunters, not soldiers. Use your strengths, stealth, terrain, speed. Hit their supply lines, disrupt their comms, make them chase shadows. Force them to fight on your terms. The elders argued, their voices a melodic cacophony. Lyrath remained silent, her staff steady, but her eyes flicked to Ethan, a spark of respect buried in their amethyst depths. The Prime raised a claw again. Your words have merit, Fleshkin, but they require trust we do not yet have. Lyrath, you will oversee him. If he proves false, his blood is on your claws. Lyrath's runes flared, but she nodded. Understood, honored Prime. As they left the chamber, Ethan caught Lyrath's glance. You're betting a lot on me, he said, his tone half joking, half probing. Sure you're ready for that? Her mandibles twitched, a faint smile in her eyes. I'm betting you're not as foolish as most Fleshkin. Don't prove me wrong. The next morning, scouts returned with grim news. A massive force, hundreds of deserters, was moving through the Ember Wastes, their numbers swelling daily. They were led by a Sytheran named Vincan, a former clan leader exiled for heresy, now calling himself the Voice of the Void. He'd united the deserter factions, rallying them with promises of seizing the Starheart and reshaping Sytheran society. His forces had already overrun 2 outposts, cutting off vital crystal shipments that powered the Citadel's defenses. Ethan and Lyrath joined war leader Tiresh, a towering Sytheran whose runes told of decades of battle, in the strategy vault. The chamber was lined with holographic maps, the Badlands rendered in shimmering detail. Tiresh's eyes, a deep sapphire, studied Ethan with barely concealed skepticism. The Fleshkin has ideas, he said, his voice a low rumble. Speak them. Ethan approached the map, his mind racing. Vincan's playing for a big win. He wants the Starheart, but he's not stupid. He knows a direct assault won't work. He's hitting your outposts to starve you out, force you to defend the Citadel, while he picks you apart. You're reacting, not acting. Teresh's claws twitched. And you propose what, exactly? Turn the tables, Ethan said, pointing to choke points on the map. Your people move like ghosts through this terrain. Set up ambushes here, here, and here. Small teams, hit and fade tactics. Sabotage their supply convoys, jam their comms, make them paranoid. Force Vincan to spread his forces thin, then pick them off. Lyrath's eyes gleamed, her staff tilting slightly. It's bold. But it requires precision and trust between clans, something we rarely achieve. Tiresh's runes flared, his voice skeptical. And why should we trust the humans' tactics? Your kind are known for chaos, not strategy. Ethan grinned unfazed. Chaos is our strategy. We've been fighting ourselves for millennia. Nobody's better at turning a bad situation into a win. Your choice is simple: stick to your traditions and lose, or try something new and maybe survive. The vault buzzed with tension as clan leaders debated, their voices sharp and melodic. Some saw merit in Ethan's plan, others called it madness. Lyra spoke up, her voice cutting through the noise. The Fleshkin's tactics saved the Starheart once. They could work again. Vincan expects us to defend, not attack. That's our advantage. Tiresh studied the map, his claws tapping rhythmically. Very well. We try the humans' plan. But if it fails, Fleshkin, your life is forfeit. Ethan nodded, his grin unwavering. Fair enough. Let's make it work. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Sytheran warriors moved like shadows, gathering weapons and mapping routes through the Badlands. Ethan worked alongside Lyrath, coordinating teams and refining tactics. Her precision impressed him, every movement calculated, every order clear. But he noticed the crack in her staff again, its faint glow seeming to pulse with her focus. It wasn't just a flaw, it was a story, one she hadn't shared. At dusk, they took position in a concealed ravine overlooking a deserter supply route. The air was thick with ash, the red dwarf sun sinking into a blood-red haze. Ethan crouched beside Lyreth, his carbine ready, his shoulder still aching but ignored. "Nervous?" she asked, her voice low, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Terrified," Ethan admitted, his grin sly. "But that's when humans do their best work." Lyreth's runes flickered, a hint of amusement in her gaze. "Your species is strange, Fleshkin. You thrive in chaos. It's our superpower," he said, checking his carbine's charge. "Yours is moving like you own this place. Let's use both." The deserters appeared as shadows in the haze, a convoy of hover sleds loaded with crystal canisters. Their formation was tight, disciplined, but predictable. Ethan signaled to Lyreth, who relayed orders through a silent comms pulse. The ambush erupted like a storm. Sytheran warriors struck from concealed positions, plasma lances cutting through the convoy. Ethan's carbine roared, dropping a guard before he could react. The sleds ground to a halt, deserters scrambling for cover. Within minutes, half the convoy was in flames, the survivors retreating in disarray. Lyreth moved like a wraith, her crescent blade flashing, her runes blazing. Ethan followed, his shots precise, his human instincts meshing with her alien grace. They vanished into the ravine before the deserters could regroup, leaving chaos in their wake. Back at the Citadel, the victory was bittersweet. Scouts reported Vincon's forces adapting, their raids growing bolder. Ethan and Lyreth joined Tiresh in the strategy vault, the holographic map now marked with new losses. "Your ambush worked," Tiresh said, his voice grudging. "But Vincon's numbers grow. He's rallying more clans to his cause." Ethan studied the map, his mind racing. "He's baiting you into a big fight. A showdown at the Starheart. Don't take it. Keep hitting his edges, supply lines, comms relays, anything that keeps him off balance." Teresh's eyes narrowed. "You ask us to abandon honor for guerrilla tactics. This is not our way. Your way's getting you killed," Ethan said bluntly. "Vincon's counting on your pride. Use it against him." Lyreth's staff tilted, her voice steady. "The Fleshkin is right. Vincon wants a battle we cannot win. We must fight as hunters, not soldiers." Tiresh hesitated, his runes dimming, then nodded. "Prepare the next strikes. But know this, human, if we falter, your blood will stain the Badlands first." The days that followed were a relentless grind. Ethan and Lyreth led hit and fade attacks, targeting deserter outposts and convoys. Each strike was a calculated risk, their teams moving through terrain that seemed to shift with malice. Ethan's human ingenuity, improvised traps, decoy signals, meshed with the Sytheran stealth, creating a rhythm of destruction that left Vincon's forces reeling. But the cost was high. 2 teams didn't return, their runes snuffed out in the ash. One night, as they rested in a concealed camp, Lyreth watched Ethan clean his carbine, her eyes lingering on his scarred hands. "You fight like you've nothing to lose," she said, her voice soft. "Why?" Ethan paused, his grin fading. "Got plenty to lose. My crew, my home, maybe my sanity. But out here, you fight for what's in front of you. Right now, that's keeping this citadel standing." He glanced at her staff, its crack glowing faintly. "What about you? That thing's seen some battles. What's its story?" Lyreth's runes dimmed, her gaze distant. "It broke in my first hunt, against a traitor who sought the Starheart. I kept it to remind me, strength comes from what endures, not what's perfect." She met his eyes, her voice softer. "You're not what I expected, Fleshkin. Call me Ethan," he said, his grin returning. "And you're not what I expected either, Lyreth." Their moment was shattered by a scout's urgent signal. Vincon's forces were massing for a direct assault on the citadel, their numbers now in the thousands. The holographic map in the strategy vault showed a tide of red markers converging on the Badlands. Teresh's voice was grim. "Vincon has declared himself the Starheart's true guardian. He claims our Conclave has lost its way." Ethan studied the map, his stomach tightening. "He's forcing your hand. A siege will crush you unless you act first. There's a choke point here. He pointed to a narrow pass, where you can bottleneck his forces. Set traps, use the terrain, hit them hard before they reach the citadel. Teresh's claws twitched. You propose we abandon the Starheart's defense? No, Ethan said. I propose you make Vincon regret ever stepping into that pass. Lyretha's eyes gleamed, her staff steady. It could work. But it requires every clan to act as one, a unity we've not seen in generations. Then make them see it, Ethan said, his voice hard. Vincon's betting on your divisions. Show him he's wrong. The plan took shape over hours of heated debate. Clan leaders, skeptical but desperate, agreed to Ethan's strategy. Teams were dispatched to rig the pass with plasma charges and decoy signals, while Lyreth and Ethan prepared to lead a strike team to disrupt Vincon's command post. The mission was a gamble: slip through enemy lines, sabotage their comms, and sow chaos before the main assault. As they moved through the Badlands at dusk, the air thick with ash, Ethan caught Lyreth watching him. What? He asked, his grin sly. You risk everything for a people who may never accept you, she said, her voice low. Why? Ethan shrugged, his shoulder protesting. Because someone's gotta show you we're not just fleshkin. And maybe I'm curious, about you, about this place. About what we could do together. Lyretha's runes flared, a faint smile in her eyes. You're a fool, Ethan. But a brave one. The command post was a fortified camp in a crater, its edges bristling with guards. Ethan and Lyretha's team moved through the shadows, their steps silent. The plan was simple: disable the comms array, plant charges, and get out. But as they neared the array, a figure emerged, Vincon himself, his runes blazing like a supernova, his presence commanding. Ethan froze, his carbine ready, but Lyretha's claw gripped his arm. Not yet, she whispered. He's mine. Vincon's voice echoed, melodic but venomous. The Starvale clans cower behind a human. Pathetic. His eyes locked onto Ethan, a sneer in his gaze. You think you can save them, Fleshkin? You'll die with them. Ethan's grin was all teeth. Keep talking, pal. Makes it easier to aim. Lyra struck first, her crescent blade flashing. Vincon parried with his own staff, its blade unmarred, its power overwhelming. Ethan opened fire, drawing the guards' attention, giving Lyretha's team time to plant the charges. The camp erupted in chaos, plasma bolts lighting the night. Ethan dove for cover, his shots precise, but Vincon was a force of nature, his blade a blur as he drove Lyreth back. She fought like a storm, her runes blazing, but Vincon was stronger. A glancing blow sent her staggering, her staff's crack flaring as it absorbed the impact. Ethan didn't think, he acted, tackling Vincon from the side. The Sytheran roared, his claws raking Ethan's chest, but Lyreth recovered, her blade finding Vincon's shoulder. He retreated, wounded but alive, as the charges detonated, shattering the comms array. They fled into the Badlands, the camp burning behind them. Lyretha's breathing was ragged, her runes dim. Ethan's chest bled, but he grinned, adrenaline pumping. Told you I'm dangerous. Lyretha's eyes met his, a spark of something new, trust, maybe, or more. You're a fool, Ethan. But I'm glad you're ours. Back at the Citadel, the Conclave convened, the air electric with hope and fear. The sabotage had delayed Vincon's assault, but his forces were still coming. Ethan stood before the elders, Lyreth at his side, her cracked staff a testament to their shared fight. The pass is ready, he said. Hit them there, and you'll break them. But it's now or never. The Prime's eyes gleamed. You've earned your place, Fleshkin. For now. Lead the strike with Lyreth. Fail, and you both fall. As they prepared for the battle, Ethan caught Lyretha's gaze, her runes glowing softly. Ready for the next move? He asked, his grin defiant. Her staff tilted, the crack catching the light. With you, Fleshkin? Always. The Voran Badlands were a cauldron of ash and crimson light as Calyx 9's dwarf sun rose, its glow fractured by swirling storm clouds. Captain Ethan Cole crouched in the narrow pass of the ember choke, his pulse carbine steady despite the blood seeping through the bandages on his chest. The air was thick with static, the ground trembling faintly as if the Badlands themselves sensed the coming storm. Beside him, Lyreth of the Starvale gripped her crescent blade staff, its cracked grip glowing faintly, her amethyst eyes scanning the horizon. The Sytheran citadel loomed in the distance, its spires glinting like a beacon of defiance. This was it, the final stand against Vincon's rebellion, a battle that would decide the fate of the Starheart and the fragile alliance Ethan had helped forge. The pass was rigged with plasma charges and decoy signals, a deadly trap designed to bottleneck Vincon's forces. Sytheran warriors, their runes glowing like stars, waited in concealed positions, their claws silent against the obsidian cliffs. Ethan's plan had unified the clans, but the cost was written in their tense postures and the scars on Lyretha's staff. He glanced at her, catching the faint flicker of her runes. "Ready for the big show?" he asked, his grin defiant despite the ache in his chest. Lyretha's eyes met his, a spark of resolve in their depths. "With you, Ethan? I have no choice." Her voice was soft, melodic, but carried the weight of battles fought together. The crack in her staff seemed to pulse, no longer a flaw but a testament to survival. War leader Teresh loomed nearby, his sapphire eyes glinting with grudging respect. "Your plan better work, Fleshkin," he rumbled, his claws flexing. "Vincon's forces outnumber us 3-1. If we falter, the Starheart falls." Ethan's grin didn't waver. "Then we don't falter. Let's give Vincon a welcome he'll never forget." The enemy appeared like a tide of shadows, their runes dim but deadly, their formation disciplined despite the chaos Ethan's hit and fade strikes had sown. Vincon led from the center, his staff blazing with unmarred violet energy, his presence a supernova of charisma and menace. His voice echoed through the pass, amplified by some unseen tech. "Clans of the Starvale, your conclave has failed you. Join me, and we will claim the Starheart's power for all Sytherans, not a dying elite." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's good," he muttered. "Almost makes you want to root for him." Lyretha's runes flared, her grip tightening. "He's a traitor. His words are poison." The battle began with a deafening roar as the plasma charges detonated, collapsing the pass's edges and trapping Vincon's vanguard in a kill zone. Sytheran warriors struck like wraiths, their plasma lances and crescent blades flashing in the crimson light. Ethan's carbine roared, his shots precise, dropping deserters before they could regroup. Lyreth fought beside him, her staff a blur, her runes blazing like a comet's tail. The pass became a maelstrom of light and sound, the air thick with the scent of scorched crystal and blood. But Vincon's forces were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. They pushed through the choke point, their plasma bolts tearing into Sytheran positions. Ethan saw a clan team fall, their runes snuffed out, and his stomach twisted. "We're losing ground," he shouted to Lyreth, ducking a bolt that scorched the cliff beside him. "We need to hit Vincon directly." Lyretha's eyes narrowed, her staff parrying a deserter's blade. "He's too well guarded. It's suicide." Ethan's grin was reckless, his chest burning but his resolve unbreakable. "Suicide's my specialty." "You in?" Her runes flared, a faint smile in her eyes. "Always, Fleshkin." They rallied a small team, 6 Sytherans, their runes glowing with desperate courage, and slipped through the chaos, using the Badlands' shifting terrain to flank Vincon's command group. The ground trembled, ash choking the air, but Lyreth led with unerring instinct, her staff's glow cutting through the haze. Ethan's human frame struggled to keep pace, his wounds screaming, but he pushed on, driven by the fire in his gut. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving something, to Lyreth, to the Sytherans, to himself. They reached a concealed ridge overlooking Vincon's position, a fortified outcrop bristling with guards. Vincon stood at its center, his staff raised, rallying his forces with a voice that shook the air. "The Starheart is ours by right. The Conclave's time is over." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his carbine steady. Big talk for a guy about to eat dirt. He signaled the team, and they struck like lightning. Lyretha's blade carved through the first guard, her runes blazing. Ethan's shots dropped 2 more, his aim honed by years of fighting against impossible odds. The Sytherans moved like shadows, their claws and lances a symphony of destruction. But Vincon was a force of nature. His staff met Lyretha's in a clash of violet energy, the impact sending shockwaves through the ridge. Ethan dove for cover, his carbine roaring, but Vincon's guards were veterans, their counterattack swift. A plasma bolt grazed Ethan's leg, searing pain lancing through him. He gritted his teeth, firing back, his shots forcing the guards to scatter. Lyreth fought like a storm, her staff's crack flaring with every strike, but Vincon was stronger, his unmarred blade relentless. "You defend a dying world, Starvale," he roared, his blows sending Lyreth staggering. "Join me, or perish!" Ethan didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Vincon, tackling him with every ounce of strength he had. The Sytheran snarled, his claws raking Ethan's back, but Lyreth recovered, her blade finding Vincon's arm. Blood, glowing violet, spilled onto the obsidian, and Vincon roared, retreating into the chaos as his guards closed ranks. The team fought their way back to the pass, the battle raging around them. Ethan's vision blurred, his wounds bleeding freely, but Lyretha's claw steadied him. "Stay with me, Ethan," she said, her voice urgent, her runes dim but fierce. "We're not done." The tide turned as the Sytheran's traps and ambushes took their toll. Vincon's forces, leaderless and disarrayed, began to falter. Clan warriors pushed forward, their runes blazing, their unity a force Vincon hadn't anticipated. By midday, the deserters were in full retreat, their numbers decimated, the pass littered with the wreckage of their ambition. Back at the citadel, the conclave chamber was transformed, its walls draped with ceremonial filaments that glowed like captured stars. The Starheart pulsed steadily, its energy a heartbeat of survival. Ethan stood before the elders, Lyreth at his side, his wounds bandaged but his posture unyielding. The Prime's eyes gleamed, her voice resonant. "Fleshkin, you came as a trespasser, yet you've become our shield. The Starheart endures because of you." Ethan's grin was tired but defiant. "Didn't do it alone. Your warriors made it happen. I just pointed them in the right direction." The elders murmured, their runes flickering with approval. A younger elder leaned forward. "Some call you ally. Others still see a threat. What say you?" Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "I say give me a chance to keep proving it. Your war's over, but the galaxy's full of threats. Humans and Sytherans could do a lot together, trade, exploration, maybe even peace. You've got the Starheart, we've got the stubbornness. Sounds like a good match." The Prime raised a claw, silencing the chamber. "By unanimous decree, Ethan Cole is granted full citizenship in the Sytheran Accord, with all rights and duties. Furthermore, you are named Starvale Tactician, advisor to the Conclave, for your role in our survival." The chamber erupted in cheers, a melodic chorus that echoed off the crystal dome. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of their trust heavier than any wound. Lyretha's staff tilted, her runes glowing softly. "You've changed us, Fleshkin," she said, her voice low. "No small feat. Call me Ethan," he said, his grin softening. "And you changed me too, Lyreth." The Prime raised her claw again. "One final rite remains." Lyreth of the Starvale stepped forward. Lyreth approached, her staff gleaming, its crack catching the Starheart's light like a captured flame. The Prime's voice was solemn. "By ancient custom, a warrior may choose a bondkin, a brother or sister of battle, to stand with them in war and peace. Lyreth, do you make such a choice?" Lyretha's eyes met Ethan's, a depth in their amethyst glow he hadn't seen before. Pride, respect, something more. "I do, honored Prime. I choose Ethan Cole as my bondkin, to stand with me until the stars fade." She extended her staff, its crescent blade pulsing gently. Ethan reached out, his hand closing over the cracked grip, his fingers tracing the fracture that had become a symbol of their shared journey. "I accept," he said, his voice steady, his grin warm. "Let's see what trouble we can get into next." The chamber roared with approval, the sound a melody of unity. The celebration lasted 3 nights, the citadel alive with light and song. Sytherans from every clan offered respects to Ethan, their questions about human tactics and culture a stark contrast to the disdain he'd faced days ago. He answered with his usual wit, but it was the quiet moments with Lyreth that grounded him. Conversations on the balcony, her runes glowing under the dwarf sun, her laughter a melody he hadn't expected to hear. On the final night, they stood overlooking the Badlands, the air cool, the stars piercing the ash clouds like defiant sparks. "Do you miss your world?" Lyreth asked, her staff resting against the railing, its crack a faint glow. Ethan considered, his grin fading. "Sometimes. My crew, my family, they're out there, wondering if I'm alive. But this feels right, you know? Like I'm where I'm supposed to be." He met her eyes, his voice soft. "What about you? Regret tying yourself to a stubborn human?" Lyreth's runes flickered, a smile in her gaze. "No regret, bondkin. You've shown me strength isn't in sameness, but in what we build together." She touched the crack in her staff, her claws gentle. "Some things are stronger for being broken." Ethan nodded, his chest tight, not from wounds, but from something deeper. "Guess we're both a little broken. Makes us a good team." Their moment was interrupted by a chime, a Terran signal, faint but unmistakable. Ethan glanced at the communicator on his wrist, its light blinking. "My people," he said, his voice quiet. "Probably a status check." Lyreth's eyes followed his gaze. "Will you answer?" "Not tonight," he said, deactivating the device. "Tonight's for us. For this." He gestured to the citadel, the Badlands, the stars. "Tomorrow's soon enough for the galaxy." Lyreth's runes glowed, her smile transforming her angular features. "Tomorrow, then." The celebration wound down as dawn approached, the citadel quieting, its filaments dimming. Ethan and Lyreth remained on the balcony, watching the dwarf sunrise, its light painting the Badlands in shades of fire and shadow. In the distance, a Sytheran transport approached, likely the first of many diplomatic missions now possible between their peoples. Lyreth touched the scar on Ethan's jaw, her claws gentle where her staff had once struck. "That first blow," she said, her voice soft, "was for being human." Ethan's grin returned, warm and defiant. "Then you'll love my next trick." 6 months later, Lyreth stood on a cliff overlooking the citadel, the Badlands stretching endlessly below. A new banner flew from the highest spire, its runes a blend of Sytheran and human symbols. Carved into the cliff face was a message, fresh and deep, in both languages. "The stars are ours. Ready for the next fight?" Beside it, a human symbol, a Terran eagle, wings spread. Lyreth ran her claws along her staff's crack, its texture familiar, its glow steady. She'd carried it through countless battles, its flaw a reminder of her own strength. Now, it felt like a promise, of unity, of change, of a future forged with a human who'd defied every expectation. She smiled, her voice a whisper to the wind. "I am Bonkin. I am."